Well, hello. I'm Rob Welch. I'm the instructor for LIT315. Hello, welcome, and I hope you're as excited as I am to get going with this. Every week, I'll go ahead and give a short video, and I will try to keep it as brief as possible. I have a tendency to get excited about talking about literature, so I have to keep myself in check a little bit, but I'll try to keep these fairly succinct and fairly on top. All right. The whole point on them is for me to give a little bit more context about things I think you need to know about in regard to the literature, and also to give some pointers for where I think things need clarification for our work for the week. All right. So every week, expect to see another video from me talking about stuff that's going on with the class. All right. So this week, we're starting out our adventure in exploring American fiction by establishing a sort of baseline, something to use to compare to what comes next. And this really is a kind of a what comes next class, all right, where we're always building up to something new and different and seeing variations. So the designers for this course have decided that the appropriate baseline for us to start with is talking about local color. And I can't say that I entirely disagree. Local color is a long-lived genre of fiction that started about the time that American realism did, just after the Civil War. And it continued in popular culture well after modernism was underway in the 20th century. So, it lasted a good long time. Maybe it's still going on for that matter. Well, that's one of the things that we always have to talk about. Now, I say I can't entirely disagree, but I can disagree in parts. And so what I want to talk about is that one of the most important things you can do in literary studies is define the terms that you're using. For our purposes, we're kind of treating local color as all equal. Across the board, it's going to be the same. We're defining it as writing that represents the way that people in particular areas of the US lived. This includes representing the habits, views, and speech of the people, often in dialect. And it also means investing heavily in representing the unique environment that these people lived in. And think of that in terms of both the area, as in, the nature of the place, whether it's mountainous, whether it's swampy, whatever, but also what that does to the human environment that people create around them. All right. Again, kind of a big picture view of environment. Now, if you move outside of our classroom, though, you're going to need to explain to any other scholar you run into, and when you're talking about literature, how exactly you're using the term local color. And that's because it does have different associations. So I just wanted to, kind of run through those for you. First one, often male writers in this genre are referred to as regional writers, while female writers are referred to as local color artists. In part, this is just a practice left over from the good old days, otherwise known as the sexist old days. And that's something we try to avoid. That doesn't mean that we don't use these terms in that way. It just means that when we use them, we're going to be referring to the way authors contemporary to local color thought about these things. And that was with overtly sexist views. So we need to, draw a line between that, the way they thought about it, and the way we think about it. All right. The second thing to think about is this. I mentioned that local color was a recognized popular genre for a long time. And that means we have to really think about, what we're going to fit into this category. So if you look at our readings for this week, the one by Bret Harte dates from the end of the 1860s. The one from Chopin is from the 1890s. And the one from Zetkala Shah dates from 1901. Oh, well, we have 2, one from 1901 and 1902. That is quite a stretch of time. And so think about how much things can change in 4 decades. To put it in today's terms, 40 years ago, the top pop song in the country was Centerfold by Jay Giles Band. The top film was On Golden Pond, and the best-selling book was North and South by John Jakes. I am, to greater and lesser degrees, slightly appalled by every one of those for different reasons. However, my point is that a ton can change in 40 years. And so it is absolutely to be expected that a ton did change from the time of Bret Hart to the end of the century. And we might really want to think twice about, lumping everything that goes on in that time period together as one thing. Now, lastly, this deals with literary theory. Feminist scholars tend to think of the popular writing, which was termed local color at the time, and which was produced largely by and for women, as they think of it as a special area of study just for them. And when they're speaking about it, they're not including people like Bret Hart and Mark Twain. So really, they're using the term to ID a part of the genre that's of special interest. And they're not talking about it in a broad sense. So I tell you this because, this is a lit class, and you will be looking at some research during the class. And I want you to be aware of how people are, using it outside of the way we're using it. For thinking about the way these scholars are addressing local color, you can think about the early work of Kate Chopin, that some of that fits into this. But you should also tie it together with a bunch of other women writers like Mary Wilkins Freeman and Sarah Orne Jewett. And those are people you might not know because their fame has not lasted, although they were, rock stars of writing at the end of the 19th century. Both of these writers were very popular. Typically, they centered their stories on older, wise female characters who lived in traditional rural settings as respected independent figures. All right. They were people, meaning the characters, who provided continuity for their communities. Now, these characters were set very specifically in opposition to things that were modern and urban. So for Chopin, what's interesting is that she often used, when she engaged in this, she often uses African-American women as these figures. And it's interesting, it's progressive in some ways, and it's also problematic in some ways for some of her representations. All right, so, but again, just to give you an idea about how things line up. So during the week, I'll post more information contextualizing local color, and I'll provide, whatever I think is good for subjects for you to consider in contextualizing this in general. Now, this week, we have 2 graded projects. One is a discussion, and in that discussion, you're to introduce yourself and then share your views on our readings in local color. And then we also have a short analysis paper. This is 1 to 2 pages, and it's just basically you providing a literary analysis, a literary reading, describing your views of what's going on in at least one or more of the readings for this week, to try to put down how you see the local color artists reaching their objectives and what those objectives are. All right. So the last thing I need to say is that what's important for it to know is I'm guessing it's unlikely that this is your first class with SNU, but just to remind you, the way Brightspace works in the first week is that it's expecting to see you at all students active, and it has filters on it that will look for inactive students and automatically remove them for the course. So It's really important that you post some work during the first week in order to not be seen as inactive and be removed. All right. So do that. If you can't, if something's going wrong before you can, if something goes wrong between now and then it's really important that you contact your advisor to make sure that doesn't happen. All right. So I really look forward to working with all of you. I'm really excited about teaching this class, and I hope you're going to enjoy it at least at least half as much as I will, but hopefully even more. All right. So until next week, adios for now.